Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, aka Caliban, and sorry Enterprise, sorry Firefly, but in my opinion, the best space cowboy is still Steve Miller. I'm joined on this episode once again by Thad Hait. Thad is one half of the hosting team behind License to Spiel, a Bond and Bond-adjacent podcast discussing the films in and around the James Bond franchise. Thad, welcome back to the show.
Hi. Yeah. Now your listeners are all going to wonder how we draw the line between Bond and Star Trek, and the answer is we don't.
Okay, no line at all. Well, we can talk about that in just a little bit, but it's good to have you back aboard, and today we'll be talking about North Star, the 9th episode of the 3rd season of Star Trek Enterprise. Just over 20 years ago today, Star Trek Enterprise premiered on UPN. The series was something of a risk for the fledgling network and the Trek franchise in general. The finale to Star Trek Voyager had aired in May of that year, and though the finale scored high ratings, its viewership as a series fell steadily over its 7 seasons. The Trek franchise needed something new, and their solution was to deliver something both old and new at the same time. Enterprise was set to explore the early days of Starfleet, a century before Kirk's Enterprise, showing how humanity scaled the ladder to the heavens, all while exploring Trek's usual blend of allegorical storytelling. However, the reality of the September 11, 2001 attacks affected Enterprise, as it did all media, transforming the origin story of the Federation's utopia into a meditation on the fears and prejudices that still divide us, both in the 21st century and the 22nd. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First, Thad, it's great to have you back on the podcast, and it has been a long, strange year since we last spoke.
A little bit.
Yeah, you joined the show, of course, last year to talk about Star Trek Nemesis, and since that time, Star Trek cons both went extinct and have recently come back to life, like Spock in Star Trek 3. And I know that you've been out there. How's your experience been going to cons this year?
Better than I was expecting, honestly.
Yeah.
So I went to the 55-year mission tour in Vegas, the convention formerly known as STLV.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well. I would say attendance was lighter than usual, but not like it wasn't a ghost town by any means. I'd say maybe 2/3 to 3/4 the normal attendance.
Okay.
And they handled it really well. It was a 100% masked con, and it worked. They required either proof of vaccination or negative COVID test within, I think it was within 24 hours, or either 24 or 48 hours of starting the con. And then for the people that were there for all 5 days, they had the people that weren't vaccinated but got a test. They had them retest halfway through the week, which I was glad to see that they did that, because obviously if you're in Vegas for 5 days, you could very clearly come down with something during that period.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And I think it worked out really well. I think obviously, a bit of an adjustment. It was a little different from normal just because it was no longer a licensed con as well. But I think it worked out pretty well. In general, it was the convention that I've, really enjoyed going to. And it was great to see friends for the first time in 2 years. And it worked out well. And then a couple weeks ago, I went to a smaller con in New Jersey, and that also, I think, worked well. I think it's showing here that at this point, conventions in the time of COVID can happen safely.
Yeah. I plan on going to the new official Trek Con in Chicago next year. But
I'll be there as well.
Oh, cool. Good. How did you see that the Vegas Con had changed, if at all?
Okay, so since it was no longer official, they no longer had, the word Star Trek in anything. Okay. So weirdly, they didn't at any point tell a story or anything, but they a lot of the imagery they made up this weird this weird sci-fi fake thing where they spray painted the Borg alcove photo op that they had for years. They spray painted it silver and called it the Threll Transportation Hub.
Okay.
Things like that. There were weird posters up that showed weird distorted things and would say oh, we have returned, or we are one. And it was this weird sci-fi thing that they were trying to rebrand as, but they never actually addressed it in any way. It was just the visuals, which I thought was odd. But in general, it was more or less the same con that it's always been.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the same kind of guests they always have, the same kind of vendors in the vendors room, all that. There was no official CBS presence, so there weren't any announcements about shows or anything. But honestly, that's something. Yes, they did get the big announcement about Picard a couple years ago, but that was the exception rather than the rule. Normally, there were not big announcements at STLV. They usually save those for San Diego or New York.
Yeah, Star Trek Day is getting a lot of those now too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, it's never, I mean, you don't have to brand a general sci-fi con too hard. It's like, hey, nerds, sci-fi con, right? So I was just kind of curious how they would do that. But it seems like, I mean, there's a ton of vendors who that's their bread and butter. So everybody's going to show up still. But I guess they just didn't have the official Star or CBS thing. There was a lot of stars there still and personalities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, fewer than normal because a bunch of stars canceled in the weeks leading up as the Delta variant was surging. Because there was like that month or so in the beginning of summer where it looked like COVID was actually going away. So I think some of the stars booked it or were okay with going then and then weren't by August. But there were still plenty of stars. A lot of big names were there. I mean, Shatner was there. So there actually. Who was George Takei, Walter Koenig, like the kind of people that you kind of expect not to go out during a convention during a pandemic were there. It was interesting, but then also a lot of people did cancel. Like the only TNG main cast member who was there was Denise Crosby.
Okay.
But
that's interesting.
That was the exception again because there were a bunch of Voyager stars were there, a bunch of the Enterprise cast were there. Several of the DS9 casts were there. They still had their fabled 100 stars. It's one of the things Creation, the company that runs it, like advertises is that they'll have at least 100 guests. It was funny. In order to make that number, they at the last minute added a bunch of people, added like 4 or 5 people who appeared on a panel on the last day that like actors that may have appeared in Star Trek for like 4 seconds at one point, but like already had relationships with Creation through other shows. Like there were some Supernatural actors were there, and some Stargate actors that Creation had working relationships with because they had done other franchise conventions. And like, okay, we'll do this panel of this. So there was on the last day there was a panel with 3 Supernatural actors and Tony Amendola, who was in Star Trek but is more famous for Stargate.
Yeah, that's I could see that. Just like the extras are also ran panel, and then people just talking about. They probably talked about Supernatural a lot.
Yes, they did. Like I think the only one that they added, who was a character who had a name in Star Trek, was Raphael Savarge, who played. Now I'm blanking on the traitor on Voyager in season 2.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't remember his name either.
That was like the only guy that was like an actual named actor.
Okay. All right. I remember him talking about his death. Yeah, I remember him talking about his death scene when Neelix like throws him, into the plasma core or whatever, for on another panel. I've seen some of your photos with the celebrities of Trek, and the plastic barrier between the stars and the fans is a unique solution, I guess, to interaction. I'm guessing there are a few attempts to replicate the end of Wrath of Khan.
Yes, a few people did that. I mean, I know a bunch of people were unhappy about it and were talking about, I'm going to use Photoshop and edit this out. And it's like, I don't know. For me, I like to get the celebrity photos as a memory of, for one thing, it's great to have a photo with the celebrity, but it's also just, those are a great way to remember a convention too. And in a lot of ways, the ones with the plastic barrier, they are a memory of a specific time in 5 years looking back and seeing those. They're like, that was during COVID, I actually kind of enjoy it. And the same with, there were a few actors that required masks for their photos. And I know some people were really mad about that. And I had no problem with that either. You can still tell it's them.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's not like, yeah. I mean, what are you looking for exactly? You're looking to spend time with the person and get a picture of them. So,
Right.
plastic barrier or no, mask or no, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
There, of course, you're always cosplaying. I've seen your Lower Decks cosplay. Or any other cosplay outfits that you're working on are going to debut soon?
That I'm going to debut soon? No, nothing new really.
Yeah.
I have a couple things planned for Chicago.
Sure.
But the one that I was most proud of at STLV this year, I mean, I do enjoy the Boimler cosplay that I do Lower Decks, which is super easy, just a uniform and a purple wig. But another one the one that I did at STLV, which was also a really easy one to do, but you can only do it at a con like STLV, where it's primarily where people are there for Star Trek and will know what you're doing. I did Miles O'Brien as Falcon from Arman Bashir.
Oh yeah, sure. That's a great one.
Yeah. In retrospect, doing that the year of face masks, so that like my face, there's like a quarter of my face is not covered by some sort of something, because I'm wearing a wig and an eye patch and a face mask. It was very hot.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Why is Falcon so sweaty? Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like the costumes like get more and more, if not elaborate, like tougher to replicate as we go on in these shows. You know, I know a lot of cosplayers were like, "Oh, the Discovery costumes and the little arrows and how to get all that detail in." Strange New Worlds, like the costumes look great, but it's like, how are you gonna like make this like thick jacket, you know, with the asymmetrical zipper and everything? It's a lot of seamstresses are going to be working.
There are enterprising companies in China that are just making those uniforms and selling them on eBay.
Yeah.
There are very good Discovery uniforms that you can buy on eBay. The same for Lower Decks and Picard. So I'm sure that we'll get a Strange New Worlds one as well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about License to Spiel, your new James Bond podcast with Carl Wonders. No Time to Die, the James Bond movie, is finally belatedly coming out this year. Yeah. And it's Craig's last outing as Bond, so it's a significant time. But why else did you want to do a James Bond podcast?
Well, so funnily enough, we released our first episode this past week, but we actually started recording a year and a half ago.
Wow. Okay.
We've just been really bad at publishing. But basically, it was back in spring of 2020. Carl and I were talking, and we both enjoy podcasting, and we're friends. We enjoy talking to each other. We also both enjoy the Bond films. So like, we should, figure out something to do, because in 2020 it wasn't like you could do anything else other than hang out with your friends virtually. So we thought of something, a topic we could do, and we also we know each other through Star Trek fandom, but like at the same time there are so many Star Trek podcasts already in the community, and yes, there are plenty of Bond podcasts, but that's beside the point. We wanted to do something interesting, so we're like, well, let's do the Bond films. So that's what we're doing. And yes, the reason we did finally get pushed to publish, we're like, well, we should really start publishing our podcast before No Time to Die comes out. At the time that we started recording, it was going to come out. It had just been postponed for the first time.
Yeah, and I mean, you've kind of kept pace with the movie's own postponements. With Craig leaving, I feel, I mean, in the internet age, everything is drama, right? So like, I feel like there's been a lot of quote unquote drama around Craig's tenure, but really it's just been an actor doing like a 5 solid, a Bond action movies. What do you think? What do you think the franchise is looking to do going forward? They're going to pick a new Bond, I guess. And do you think they're going to try to?
Will. I'm not sure. Because with Craig, with the way the Craig films started out, they wanted to do like the origin of Bond, basically. Yeah. And it has worked better or not as well, depending on the movie.
Well, yeah.
I feel like but it started out great with Casino Royale, and I've heard good things about No Time to Die. Our European friends have already been able to start watching it this weekend. We here in America have to wait till next weekend.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure, because the way the Craig films have been going, they've been sort of setting him up as they've been like how everything leads to the bond that we know from the other films.
Mm-hmm.
So that would almost make it feel like they want to do like the next one would be like a continuation of that, would be like more following the standard formula. But I suspect that's not how they're going to go. I suspect they're going to try to do something more modern.
More modern in terms of trying to sort of recast Bond as a different kind of spy, or what's modern to you?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, I would love to see them do that. Try to cast Bond as a different kind of character. Yeah. I think it's past time that we have someone other than a middle-aged white man.
Sure.
So,
or late age, old
right.
white man.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Especially if you look at Roger Moore's later movies. Yeah. But yeah, I think, yes, I think obviously we'll probably find out more when we can see No Time to Die. But I think they're probably going to want to go a slightly different direction to continue to shake up the franchise.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good idea. We're talking about Star Trek and Westerns today, which has sometimes been a good combination. And Trek also sometimes, though not often, has been combined with the spy genre, like with the Bashir episodes of DS9 and the Section 31 plots of Enterprise and Discovery and DS9. Do you think that Trek and spy fiction are a good combination?
I think they can be, yeah.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed the Section 31 episodes of DS9. I thought they worked really well. I, for the most part, enjoyed Section 31's inclusion in Discovery, although I thought it was probably focused a little too much on them for a while. But yeah, I think spies can certainly work. I think I would enjoy a Star Trek spy show about, spies in Star Trek.
Yeah.
I think that could be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to get that, I guess, in Section 31, which Maybe. They are committed to making now. Yeah.
I mean, are they? Are they really?
Well, that's what they said on Star Trek Day or whenever the last announcement was. But I'm sure it's going to be like gadgets and super science and stuff like that. But I would be interested in just a plot of intrigue. You think about Inter Arnhem, whatever that title of that episode is, where Bashir is just going to a conference and he's trying to figure out, like, is this guy a spy or not? Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing I want to see more than
invisibility suits and
I want to see more like the political intrigue. I think that could be really cool. Some of my favorite Star Trek novels delve deeply into the politics of stuff.
Yeah. There is a lot of changes going on in sci-fi properties right now. It was announced recently that Russell T Davies would be returning to write and oversee Doctor Who with the departure of the lead, Jodie Whittaker, and the current showrunner. What do you think about the prospects of him returning to Who?
So I'm in the minority where I actually have enjoyed Chris Chibnall's run as the showrunner of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But I also did love the Russell T Davies era, and I think that he's going to do a great job when he comes back.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's interesting that, he took this thing that was like kind of silly and pretty much dead as a property and made it very fresh and modern. And then he went on, and I haven't actually seen anything else that he's done, but I know that he has not been idle in the last 15 years or so. He's been writing other things and winning awards and probably.
I don't think I've seen any of it either.
Yeah, he's been developing his craft. So I wonder what it'll be like for him to come back to this thing, being probably leveled up as a writer and also going, okay, so what, I got to do something that I haven't done before. Like, how am I going to change this thing?
Yeah. And I think the certain subset of people on the internet who are always annoyed at everything that they view as too woke are going to be disappointed when they discover that Russell T Davies is not going to give them quote unquote not woke Doctor Who.
Yeah, just keep walking. He's definitely not going to change that at all. It was also announced recently by J. Michael Straczynski, the creator of Babylon 5, that he'd be rebooting B5 as a series.
I am very interested in that. I think a reboot is the right decision.
Yeah.
With Babylon 5, they have tried to do follow-ons a few times since the show ran, and none of them have really been that great. And at this point, like half of the cast is dead. So
yeah.
If they did do a sequel, it would be disappointing because they wouldn't be able to bring back so many people.
Yeah.
So I think a reboot is probably the way to go with this. I think, and I want to talk about people who have not been idle. J. Michael Straczynski has certainly not been idle. He has continued to hone his craft over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think he'll be able to take that and apply it to Babylon 5 and create something really good and a nice reimagining of it. I'm hoping it'll be sort of like how Ronald D. Moore created the Battlestar Galactica reboot that took the original and just made it so much better. I'm hoping we'll see something like that for Babylon 5.
Yeah, I think that he's already mentioned that is kind of an inspiration or a framework he's looking at. I think that also what I'm interested to see is that, Babylon 5 in its position in the Star Trek universe or the sci-fi universe, Freudian slip, has always been a kind of response to Star Trek, kind of doing something else. And so I'm fascinated to see how a modern B5 will look reacting to later Star Trek, like Enterprise, and then also CBS Star Trek. Like what holes will they try to fill that they think that Star Trek isn't filling? And also, we all know that they bet really hard on CGI effects early in the development of CGI effects. And so I'm very interested to see the visual look now that CGI can accomplish so much if they'll try to do that again.
I imagine they will. I mean, that's how most sci-fi shows are at this point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The era of shooting models is over, unfortunately.
Yeah, it really
I do love the look of models.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
But I realize that you can do so much more with CGI. So, of course, they're going to do that.
Did they ever build a model of Enterprise to shoot?
I don't think so.
Or the NX-01 is what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. I don't think so. I think that was entirely models.
Yeah.
Or not models, entirely CGI.
Nothing to auction off after the show's over. I guess you could turn the original files into an NFT or something like that now and then do that. Oh,
jeez. Don't give them that idea.
Talking about new series, Apple TV has finally aired its adaptation of Isaac Asimov's Foundation. Have you got a chance to check that out?
I have seen the first 2 episodes. I have not read the books, so I can't really comment on how faithful it is to the books or anything like that. I'm intrigued so far. As with everything else that Apple TV has done, the production values are through the roof. It looks amazing. Yeah. And I really love Lee Pace and Jared Harris, although I think spoiler, I don't think Jared Harris is going to be in the rest of the show.
Yeah, he's the guy that, the same thing with Expanse. You bring him in to kick it off, and then he's got to go off and do other stuff.
Right. But yeah, I think it has promise, and I'm definitely looking forward to watching it more. I don't think it's going to dethrone For All Mankind as my favorite Apple TV Plus sci-fi show. But yeah, I'm enjoying it.
I haven't read the books either. I guess I'm familiar with the idea and the story behind them, though. Something that I really like about the show is that it took something that was written, in the 40s and 50s and is kind of regressive in a lot of ways, and it was able to really renew it for the 21st century and can keep the same good kernel of an idea, but just broaden it, both in terms of its appeal, but also its representation and do all that stuff. And I think that that's something that Trek, which has never really gone away, has continually done to itself over the years. So I think it's great that the people at Apple were able to take this old thing that we could have just enshrined and just said, well, it's dusty old sci-fi, and made it new for this millennium.
Yeah. I just want to say, just in general, this period that we're in right now is just an incredibly wonderful time to be a sci-fi fan. We have so much amazing sci-fi that is already out, is coming out, is planned. It's like, if I, as a kid in the 90s, would never even have been able to imagine the sheer glut of quality sci-fi programming that we have today.
Yeah. No more trying to I guess I'll watch Time Tracks or whatever. So you can watch whatever you want. Well, we're talking about Enterprise today. It's been 20 years since its premiere, and I think it has grown in people's estimation in the years since it aired. But I think it still has the reputation of being the black sheep of the franchise. And I was hoping that we could explore at least a little bit today why that reputation persists. You know, was it the setting or the tone or the time in which it premiered and the themes it had to explore, or just the writing, or its sometimes admittedly regressive politics?
I think it was a combination of all of that, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think we also should mention the fact that that the studio tried to have a lot more control over Enterprise than they did over the other 90s Rick Berman era Star Trek shows.
Yeah.
So like it was the network, I guess the UPN network was very influential in where the show went, which for Voyager they were pretty hands off, but they changed management for Enterprise and that changed.
That's interesting then to think about like a what if situation where Enterprise is just, syndicated like the earlier shows and like where it goes instead.
So what's interesting on this is what Brandon Braga's wanted to do, but the network said that they couldn't do it this way because it wasn't sci-fi enough, was he wanted to do like he wanted the show to be about building the ship and them like the whole like everything that we see in like the flashbacks in the first episode and then later in First Flight, he wanted that to be the plot of like the first season of the show.
Like a
and
Red
I think
Stuff type
that
thing.
and I think that could have been really interesting, but the network wanted them to, go into space and fight aliens. So
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I think that could have been really interesting, as long as it, eventually ended up in space. Like we don't want seven seasons on the ground. Yeah,
that would have been a bit much.
Well, we're talking the Enterprise episode North Star, the 9th episode of the 3rd season of Enterprise. It first aired on November 12th, 2003. It was written by David A. Goodman. And Goodman also wrote or co-wrote 3 other episodes of Enterprise. Those are Precious Cargo, Judgment, and The Forgotten, as well as serving as a consulting producer for the show's 2nd season.
3 out of 4 ain't bad.
Yeah, I guess. He wrote 3 Star Trek books: Star Trek Federation, The First 150 Years, the autobiography of James T. Kirk, and the autobiography of Jean-Luc Picard. Goodman's first script for TV was a 1989 episode of The Golden Girls, and he went on to become a writer and co-executive producer for Futurama, where he wrote the fan-favorite episode Where No Fan Has Gone Before. That led to him working for Star Trek. Yeah, and after Trek, he became an executive producer and writer for Family Guy and American Dad, and he's currently a writer and executive producer on The Orville. So this is like an example of, I know a lot of people are fans of Star Trek and then end up, working for Star Trek, but a guy who literally like created something on his own for somebody else. And then they're like, hey, that's pretty good. Want to do Star Trek? Like Mike McMahon, doing his Star Trek Twitter account and book. And then it's like, hey, you need somebody to do this cartoon show.
Because you mentioned it, I have to take a moment to say that I just love Star Trek Lower Decks to pieces.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah. So I got to get to work on my Star Trek project.
Absolutely.
So I can get the call from the big show. The episode was directed by David Straighton. Straighton directed 10 episodes of Enterprise in total across all 4 seasons of the show. There's no start date for this episode, but your assignment, Thad, if you can, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of North Star.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to count my words, but
that's fine. That's fine. Ballpark.
They encounter a planet populated by humans who were abducted in the 19th century as slaves, who later rebelled against the aliens who abducted them and now treat the aliens as slaves themselves.
Yeah, I think that's pretty complete. Here's some interesting facts from the memory banks about this episode, and feel free to jump in with anything that you'd like to add. The episode was influenced by TOS episodes with similar premises. In fact, the screenwriter Goodman was challenged by series producer and creator Brandon Braga to come up with a parallel Earth story in the vein of TOS. And Goodman focused his efforts on a premise that was easier to explain than the uncanny parallel worlds of Miri or the Omega Glory. His concept, when it's just like Earth. Well, let's not explore that. Let's just just get down there. His original concept was that the planet in the episode would have a medieval setting, but Braga requested that it be a Western instead, and Goodman paid homage to the TOS Western Spectre of the Gun by naming one of the alien characters Cronin, for Lee Cronin, the pseudonym of Gene Kuhn, who wrote that episode. The exterior shots in the episode were shot primarily at Western Town on the Universal Studios backlot, and from a chronological perspective, this is the first time in the franchise that a Starfleet officer specifies how many to beam up when he is beaming Bethany up to the ship.
See, you also read the Memory Alpha article to prepare for this episode.
Yes, that's where I get all my facts from. Yes.
I think the set is the same place they shot TNG's Fistful of Datas.
Okay, that would make sense. Yeah. It's always, I mean, Star Trek is, there's a lot, they put a lot of money into it and they have like amazing sets, but it's always nice to just go, let's go outside. Or like, hey, call up Universal. Can we use the cowboy set for this one? Or the Mayberry set for many episodes of TOS. Let's talk about
including Miri, actually.
Yeah, Miri. Yeah. And City on the Edge of Forever. And yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the guest stars in this episode. Emily Bergel plays Bethany. Bergel is an English-born American actress who got her start in Hollywood as the lead in the 1999 film The Rage, Carrie 2. She would go on to many TV appearances, including recurring roles on Gilmore Girls, Desperate Housewives, and Shameless. Glenn Morshower plays McReady in the episode. Morshower is a Trek regular. He's been on Trek 4 times. He played Ensign Burke in the TNG episode Peak Performance, Orton in the episode Starship Mine on TNG, a Makra Order guard in the Voyager episode Resistance, and he played the navigator of the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations. And he's a prolific character actor. The guy has like hundreds and hundreds of credits. Yeah. He's probably best known for the role of Secret Service officer Aaron Pierce, who he played for 7 seasons on the Fox series 24. And James Parks appears as Bennings, the Snidely Whiplash deputy. Parks first appeared on Trek as Vel in the 3rd season Voyager episode The Shoot. And Parks is the son of veteran actor Michael Parks and has appeared alongside his father in many of the films of Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez as Edgar McGraw, son of Texas Ranger Earl McGraw. So when Earl McGraw is saying, number one son, that's who he's talking to, his son, Edgar McGraw. Let's get into talking about the episode, itself. Star Trek has always dealt with allegory. I mean, that's just its bread and butter. And that's like, stories that are putatively about one thing, but are really about something real and relatable. And presumably had 9/11 never happened, Enterprise would have been a show that might have looked somewhat similar to how it ended up. I mean, we'd still be depicting a humanity that's taking its first stumbling steps into the galactic community. But because of what happened politically at the time, it instead took on a much darker, more serious tone. I have to imagine that something like the Xindi arc would not have happened, or at least wouldn't have been an entire season without 9/11.
Yeah, I was thinking season 3 would not exist without 9/11 for sure.
Yeah.
I think, obviously season 1 was, most of that was planned before 9/11 even happened. But by season 3, the entire thing, the Xindi attack and then them going out to find them and stop them. Yeah, that whole thing was clearly influenced by the 9/11 attacks and the American response.
And it's just, we'll just never know what it would have been like, I guess. We already see, in the back half of season 1, those influences start to creep in. I think about the Dean Stockwell episode.
Yes.
Which is literally called Internment or something like that.
Detained.
Which is Detained. Yeah. Which is already dealing with those themes. And then we do season 2 and do what we can, but they're already sort of cooking up this season long arc of the Xindi war. I don't know. How do you think that Enterprise did, sort of commenting on the times?
So, interestingly, this is something that I've changed opinions on. When I was in high school watching this as it first aired, I was not happy with season 3. I thought doing this season-long arc that was clearly a 9/11 allegory was just ridiculous, and there's no reason to do this. As an older adult, watching it when I like 5 years later, or longer, anyway, about 5 or 6 years later, I binged the whole thing when it came to Netflix. And I found that watching it as a binge, I think, really made it work better. And being able to look back on it with hindsight, I think that in general, the allegory works pretty well. Now season 3 is probably my favorite season of Enterprise.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I binge it too, and I would agree that it does kind of give itself to that sort of watching. And so maybe they were a little ahead of their time
Mm-hmm.
in that way. And of course, Enterprises, where the Trek franchise really started to commit to long form storytelling outside of some of the longer arcs of DS9. There's always a conflict. That's the difference between like Trek and the streaming shows you see now, which are just movies that are kind of chopped up into hours. There's always a conflict that's introduced and then wrapped up by the end of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
But they would retain those circumstances from earlier episodes, like ship damage or like them being behind enemy lines or in the Expanse. And then, of course, in the fourth season, it's all 2 and 3 parters.
Yeah. There were a couple single episodes, but yes.
It's kind of a weird episode in Enterprise's canon because they're in the Expanse. Like they've set the stakes of this thing. They've got to find the Xindi weapon. The clock is ticking, but I guess they have time to check out the cowboy planet still.
Yeah, no, this definitely fits in an odd location because the episode before it is Twilight, which is actually one of my favorite episodes of Enterprise, which is a nice timeline reset button episode. But anyway, that one is clearly part of the Xindi arc. And then the episode after this is another deep philosophical
very deep.
similitude. Yeah. So like they definitely, it's in an interesting spot. I think this is an episode that would not have been made today. It's the sort in today's 13 episode streaming arcs, they would not have the random Western planet in the middle of the season. They just wouldn't do that anymore. I think this, and I do kind of miss that. I honestly do. I love the arcs and the way they do the long form storytelling, but that's something I miss with the new 10 13 episode seasons is they don't have time to do random stories. Like DS9 had once the Dominion War started ramping up, they had plenty of arcs, but they still had time to do the episode where they played baseball. I mean, you can't, with just the way television works today, you can't do things like that anymore, and it's kind of sad.
Another episode where the set is kind of built for you already. It's like, we'll just go to this baseball field.
Yes.
You don't see that very much now, unless it's something like recently on Discovery, like they're doing kind of a backdoor pilot for Section 31, and we just do 2 episodes where we're going to do Carl and the Guardian of Forever in their universe.
And that was some of my favorite parts of season 3 because it was like that and it wasn't part of the overall story. I enjoyed that. I really liked. I would have liked it like 10 times more if Jason Isaacs had shown up at the end. But
yeah, that would have been great.
Like I feel like they really like wanted to do that, and the guy that they end up they get at the end, who then turns out to be a decoy. I think that was originally supposed to be Jason Isaacs, but they couldn't get him. That's my theory on that anyway, because it just feels like that guy was unimportant at all, and like you'd never heard of him before. And I think he was originally supposed to be Lorca, but they couldn't get Jason Isaacs.
Fingers crossed for Prime Lorca suddenly showing up in Strange New World.
Yes, you know what? I still think it's certainly possible. I don't know. Obviously, they would keep that completely under wraps. But when Strange New Worlds, during the process when Strange New Worlds was filming, there was a period where Jason Isaacs was tweeting from Toronto, which he was probably doing some other project at the same time. But yeah,
you never know. I know that he's a Star Trek fan, and he really liked working on the franchise. Does he do any events? Does he go to cons or anything?
He does cons all the time. Yeah,
good.
It's interesting because he's one of those people where he's a very well-known person. He's not just known for Star Trek either. Yeah. But he seems to genuinely enjoy talking to fans and can't get enough of it. I know I wasn't there the year he was on the Star Trek cruise, but I heard from people who were that he basically spent the whole time just hanging out with people.
Oh, that's really great. It's got to be tough to be. I mean, actors are just normal people, and some people don't mind talking to people, and other people want to do their work and just kind of go home. But just the crush of of people and like affection and emotion that comes from like being in these well-beloved shows. It has to be kind of daunting for people. And it's always great to see an actor just go, yeah, this is also part of the job. Like, I love doing this and I love talking to the fans.
Yeah. And I don't in any way like cast aspersions or blame the actors who don't want to do that. I feel like if I were an actor, I probably wouldn't want that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would either. Yeah. We've seen episodes with scenarios like this before, you know, ancient alien type situations where a group of humans have been abducted for whatever reason and transported to another planet. And I think a lot of them are TOS episodes. I mean, there's of course the 37s in Voyager. So I think
there's New Eden in Discovery.
Oh, that's true. That's right. They go right back to that, don't they? So I think it makes sense that, you know, that Goodman was originally tasked to like do an episode like this. They're like, hey, do one of those things where there's some people that don't make any sense on this planet for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I really enjoy this because this is in and of itself reaction to some of the aftermath of 9/11 allegory that's inside and separate from a season that is also a reaction to 9/11 allegory. And I really enjoy the sort of meta-ness of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Also focusing on those themes of kind of discrimination and a populace kind of striking back against somebody.
Yes.
I think that you can't, you have to acknowledge that Firefly hangs over this episode a little bit. Having come out, you know, a year or two before.
Did it though?
Firefly came out in like 2002, didn't it? 2001, 2002?
Was it? I thought it was I thought it was the same time. I could be wrong though. That's certainly, yeah. If that were the case, yes, I'm sure it influenced if it had already come out. Yeah, I thought Firefly was 2003, but I could be completely wrong on that.
I think that because it got cut short. I think it didn't make it to 2003. Its last episode was like December something. I remember all my friends.
Yeah, it was the year before. You're right.
And, you know, that's fine and all. I mean, you know, Star Trek has also done Western stuff. It really makes me wonder, like, the setting of Firefly and also the setting of this episode, like what a colony or an outpost world would really be like. Like we always see in TOS, they're going to a colony and it's just a bunch of people in jumpsuits. And then maybe they're shooting on the Disney ranch. So it seems kind of like Western. But you've got a small amount of people in an inhospitable land. There's not many resources. So it'd be similar to a Western, but I don't know if everybody would just start wearing Stetsons and dusters.
Right. But I think in this case, it's because they were abducted from the West in the first place.
Yeah. It's funny in the episode because they say, oh, the buildings are like 250 years old. And it's like, wow, it's something built in the 1800s lasts 250 years. Maybe they just continually renew it or something like that.
Maybe they don't have a lot of wind. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no wind on their planet. There you go. Yeah, we can't have the tumbleweeds to really complete the Western setting. I think that like Star Wars does a good job of taking the Western and the Western setting, like an outpost town, and making it reminiscent of a Western, but kind of grounded in their universe. Like the Mandalorian is like all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When he sort of like, you know, walks into some dusty town that's not Tatooine, but probably looks a lot like Tatooine.
Yes.
If they had had more time and maybe a little more budget, it would have been cool to see them take the Western setting and then like evolve it 250 years. So this is like a hard scrabble planet. They don't have a lot, but like how would their technology or their fashions sort of update? I predict steampunk. They would have made it to steampunk.
Yeah, no, probably. And they did that with a little bit with Voyager in the 37s. They had those people that's advanced their society. Then now they ran out of money and weren't able to show their futuristic city. But,
yeah, we just kind of hear about it. Yeah, this city's great. A lot of people want to just stay there. We often see our heroes transported back in time to like roughly the present day, like in TOS or DS9 or Voyager. But it occurred to me that since Enterprise is 100 years behind TOS and almost 200 behind DS9 and Voyager, if they were to go back in time the same amount of years, they would end up in cowboy times on Earth.
That's true. Although Enterprise did also do an episode where they went back to our time, which is also in season 3, Carpenter Street.
That's true. Yeah. Which is another kind of like kind of spy-ish or maybe more like a detective show kind of episode.
Yes.
Which I would watch. I would watch a detective procedural like a CBS on a broadcast CBS, you know, TV show where William Peterson or somebody is trying to figure out Trek crimes.
Starfleet detectives. I would absolutely watch that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Space westerns, I think that was kind of a really popular genre in the early aughts. And of course, Trek did cowboy sci-fi very early with Spectre of the Gun and A Fistful of Datas. So I don't think it's all Firefly related, but there's a strong connection in Trek storytelling with Western tales. You know, many of the TOS writers cut their teeth on the Westerns of the 50s.
And the actors.
Yeah, and the actors as well.
DeForest Kelley was a big Western actor before he was on Star Trek.
A lot of black hats for him. And of course, like the people who wrote Trek in the 90s, like grew up watching that stuff. So writers like Ira Stephen Bear and Robert Hewitt Wolf were huge fans of Westerns, John Ford Westerns in particular.
Yes. And they even mentioned John Ford Westerns in this episode.
Yeah, I love the fact that
like Trip says that he's seen all of them. Yeah.
And it reminded me like right away that it's like, oh yeah, the Enterprise crew is like closer to our time than like the TNG crew. So they've probably seen these films and they have the cultural context to like better blend in an Old West setting. I mean, certainly Archer fits right into the old time saloon. Maybe it's his previous time travel experience on Quantum Leap.
Scott Bakula ever done like a Western?
That is a great question. I'm trying to think of the things that, because he's had, he's been like a main guy on TV for a long time, and then he's had a couple kind of side roles in films. So he's
not if show on TV though, which means that they should definitely bring him back for Enterprise season 5.
Yeah, if I had $1 million or $1 billion, I'd do that. Something that really fascinates me is that there's a lot of like Trek episodes, DS9 episodes in particular, because of those writers who are just doing like the plots of Western films. Like Sons and Daughters. That episode where Alexander comes onto the ship that Worf is running is just like Rio Grande.
Oh yeah. And
there's a kind of, I don't know if it's like the idea of a frontier mentality or the kind of, in cowboy movies, the lantern-jawed leading men, in Trek, the lantern-jawed leading men and women, trying to face down like the unknown or face down bad guys. I'm not really sure why they seem to fit together so well, but they really do.
Well, it's from the start. Gene Roddenberry pitched Star Trek to the network as Wagon Train to the Stars.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. It's just in the DNA. Are you a fan of space or sci-fi westerns?
In general, I mean, it's a genre that is surprisingly underutilized. I think like you don't see space westerns all that often, like direct space westerns like this. But I mean, I loved Firefly, and
I think Firefly really capitalized on that. I think Joss Whedon just had that talent to see like, why isn't somebody doing like a show about this? Like you've got movies like Outland is a great movie, which is just like high noon in space, basically. I guess we won't talk about cowboys and aliens. Maybe you'll talk about it on your podcast because of Daniel Craig. But
I hadn't considered that.
But yeah, it's just like, why not? Like it's dusters and aliens and 10-gallon hats.
And there's a earlier Enterprise episode. I can't remember if it's season 1 or season 2. And I'm blanking on the name right now, where they help a mining planet that's being extorted by
Magnificent
Klingons.
Seven. Yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely Magnificent Seven.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the episode, but you know the one I'm talking about.
I do. Yeah. Where I just for some reason, because there's no protocol and you can't call Starfleet, Archer's like, we're just gonna like set up some traps and we're gonna help these people. We got to get rid of these Klingons. Yeah, it's I love it when they do those pastiches and they don't care if you know what they're doing. They're just like, yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah.
There's no real Xindi story in this episode. Of course, the whole season is the Xindi War season. And I was thinking about the times that Trek has done war stories like the Dominion War or the Klingon War in Disco. And I don't think that they should do it, too much. We want our enlightened Starfleet to not be trying to go to war all the time. But I do find it very fascinating when we see the characters of Trek confronted with the horrors of war and the way that they take it.
Yes. And I think DS9 does a really good job with that in several episodes.
Yeah. Also, like the TNG episode, The Wounded, I think is still one of the best examples of
that. Very much so. Also, TNG delves into that a couple times because they've also got the... and I'm also forgetting this episode's name, but it's the one with the genetically enhanced soldiers that had all been put into prison because the society didn't know what to do with them.
Oh, The Hunted?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
With
yeah.
Roga Dinar. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
James Cromwell's first Star Trek appearance.
Yeah, that's right. We actually, on my podcast Backtracking, we paired that with First Blood because it's just Rambo, basically, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they made him a killing machine and then they tried to throw him away. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this has fallen away more and more as the years have gone on, but I always like when our Trek characters seem like weird alien people, like they don't know what TV is, or Sonny Clemens, freaks them out. But when they end up doing these war-type stories, I think it's probably the most relatable that we see some of the characters. And I don't know if it's because they have to make the characters fit the kind of archetypes you see in war stories, or if war just brings out familiar behaviors in everyone, regardless of the century.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. I think, to quote an entirely different franchise, war never changes.
War never changes, yeah. Ron Perlman's one sad entry in the Star Trek universe. Like the Siege of AR 558, suddenly you've got a guy who's like, I'm going to kill all those Cardassians. It's like we all recognize that character from like a war movie.
Guy with the Cardassian neck bones on
the
necklace.
neck bones. Yeah. But it's like, as a Star Trek character, you're like, whoa, that's a little different than what we usually see.
Yeah, I know, right?
We run into, in this episode, we run into a group of humans that are from Earth, but they were taken during the time of slavery or just after. So they're not the enlightened humans of Star Trek's future. And as we see in the episode, it's kind of the resolution. They've been cut off from all this education, and all this history that Earth's had. And there's a very stark example of racism in the episode. I mean, when you start an episode with a lynching, you're headed in a particular direction.
Yes.
It's kind of like, as I was like, putting my notes together for the episodes, I kept writing like, and then the Skags do this. And I'm like, I shouldn't call them Skags. I should call them Skagarans. Like they are not.
It is fascinating that they did an entire episode about racism and then every single person on the planet is a white person.
There are all white people. And that is something of a problem. But even if you were going to do it, where would you, I mean, I guess you could just do the normal colorblind casting, but like, where would you put them? And maybe
because making all the Skagarans black would also have been a problem.
Yeah. And that's, exactly. That's my kind of issue with what the episode's trying to do. I'm not sure that its delivery is muddled. It makes sense that there would be resentment against the Skagarans. It's baked into their culture. But there is that odd reversal where the humans were the slaves and now the aliens are being discriminated against. And it doesn't forgive the humans for their brutality, but it puts me in the mind of one of those movies or shows where it's an alternate universe where black people enslaved white people or something like that. And like John Travolta's like, just trying to escape something. Of course, Roddenberry, one of his like original pitches was like, the southern planet where the black people are the slave masters and the white people are the slaves. And it's like, let's not do that though.
Yeah, maybe don't do that.
Yeah, that's allegory is like something different, but it has kind of the same idea. So like that's, I don't know. Like I think that it's, in the grand tradition of Star Trek, the theme that they're pursuing, I think is a good one, but it does get a little weird. And I'm not sure if it's them trying to do a slavery and racism is bad episode, but also combine it with their sort of 9/11 mindset, where it's like
I don't know if they're actually trying to comment on slavery at all. You kind of get that, but like they also, because at no point do they talk about owning the Skagarans or anything like that. It more feels to me like a comment on racial prejudice, but not necessarily slavery.
Yeah. I mean, the humans...
humans were slaves, yes. But the humans do not technically enslave the Skagarans. They're just second-class citizens, which, isn't good either. But
No. Which is why... That's the part that I think is a little muddled, because the humans were slaves before. And, like, once you bring up slaves and then you're, like, hanging somebody and you're discriminating against people, it gets a little confusing. I don't know how the humans get there if they're not being kidnapped by the Skagarans, but having like specifically a character educating another race that it's illegal to educate. And
Well, yeah,
and really the whole thing, like both groups, like the Skagarans and the humans, are both ignorant, like they're uneducated about advances in society, and so they're just playing this thing out over and over.
Yes, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like they're trying much more for it to be a commentary on racial prejudice than on slavery specifically.
Yeah, and I think that definitely fits with the sort of tone of the post 9/11,
right? Because it's also it's clearly a commentary on 9/11 because these people did us harm and now we must so it's also definitely got that going for it.
I like that it's illegal to teach the Skagarans, so they're going to put the teacher in jail for 10 years, and I'm like, 10 years where? Just like in the little Otis cell in the back of the Mayberry jail. Like,
I have a lot of questions about how the society survives.
Yeah, is there a bigger prison somewhere?
Like, where do the bricks come from that they built all their buildings from?
Right. Or even like the wood. I mean, presumably they have trees, but they go into the saloon and they didn't really bother to like redress it. So there's like antlers on the wall, and it's like, I guess there's deer on this planet. Where did the horses come from?
For a society to look like this, there have to, in addition to the small Western towns, there also have to be major urban centers. Otherwise you can't. The town would look a lot rougher.
Yeah, right.
Because they're not making those bricks there in that town. They're not making a lot of the things in this. They're not making the window glass in this town. I mean,
that's a great point. Yeah. There's no Space Sears catalog you can just order things from.
Right. So, like, how is the society? Did they, like, just happen to go to the backwater Old West on the planet, and this planet also has, like, its,
a San Francisco or Kansas City?
Has its Kansas City equivalent they just missed? I mean...
It would be like everything in miniature, because they say that there's, like, 6,000 people total, so maybe there's just, like, 20 people in this town, but some town has 200 people.
And they produce all the products. Yeah, I guess.
It must be. Speaking of the town, like the final shootout in the town is something you see coming from a mile away, but it's still pretty good. Oh,
yeah. And the entire process is so predictable and so very, very obviously choreographed and slow and not the way an actual fight would look at all, but I love it.
Yeah. I have to think that the Enterprise was going easy on them because they're packed to the gills with Makos that could presumably just steamroll the entire town. But it was fun to see a bullets versus phasers shootout with the pace of like one of those old Gunsmoke shows.
I find it interesting that they just went with random Makos. I guess they didn't want to pay for Stephen Culp this week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, just showcase some people with no lines. Archer totally gets plugged in this episode, and it's actually kind of bloody for Trek. Like, there's a huge
through and through shot.
Yeah, it goes right out the other side.
Yeah, and I'm glad they showed him not being able to use his arm after that happened, because otherwise, like, there's no way he was lifting his arm after he got shot through the shoulder like that.
Yeah, and they did it really. The choreography is great because he has that like knockdown, drag out, epic fist fight in the stable, and the guy's coming at him with the hay hook with his right. And once he gets it knocked into the thing, then he's open, and Archer gives him the hook with the left and just puts him down. Yeah. And then pulls a real gun on him. This episode hits a lot of the major Archer beats. Like, Archer punches, check. Archer gets captured, check. Archer's hurt, yes, check.
Archer gets hurt a lot.
Yeah.
Like at one point he has a wound on his face, and it's like there's like 20 episodes or so where Archer gets like a bleeding wound on his cheek. It's sort of like Kirk ripping his shirt.
I can't remember, and I think I know the answer, but T'Pol never like nerve pinches anybody, does she?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I was a little dismayed that she gets taken hostage so easy, but I loved the resolution, which is like, this is how all fights in Star Trek should be resolved. I have a gun that does not hurt you, but will knock you out. Just knock them both out. Just like shoot them both. Shoot the hostage.
Yeah. It works.
That's how you take care of a situation like that. There's one scene at the end of the episode that I think is very familiar to fans of Star Trek, which is the captain or somebody on a Star Trek ship showing somebody from a primitive society their world. Yeah, we see that with Archer and Bethany at the end with a beautiful graphic of the planet. And what I thought was different about this episode is usually that's that's a moment where that person goes, oh my God, like the world is not what I expect at all. But Bethany is not optimistic. She sees her world and she just thinks, like, I don't think we can ever change.
Right. And I hope, they're very going to be awful about this. I don't know. But I hope that, like, after the Xindi War, they come back to this planet and, like, give them resources and whatnot.
If they don't, then I've got a Lower Decks plot for you.
Oh, yeah. That would be a great second contact.
Yeah, third season, they'll definitely go for the dual Western, yeah. They kind of did one last week a little bit.
Yeah, I love that they did this picture of the gun with the one-dimensional sets and the red, the red sky. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully they'll swing back to that planet on their way back or later. As we get to the end of the show here, is there anything else that you wanted to say about this episode? Or something we haven't covered?
No, just that I really enjoy this episode. I think it is one that often gets overlooked because it's in the middle of the Xindi arc and not really a part of it.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy this episode.
Yeah, it's a fun little distraction. And you get to see Archer cut the floor out from somebody and he just falls through the balcony.
Yeah, I love that. Just the phaser and it's so ridiculous and it's great. I know that they won't. Again, we're talking again. It's like I know that everything about modern Star Trek is, technically and in every way better production and more realistic and all that. But I would also love like a scene like that in Discovery or something. Just a ridiculously choreographed fight there where nothing looks real, but it just looks fun anyway.
Yeah. I'd have to imagine that if Strange New Worlds will have more of a TOS feel to it, we'll have to do that someday. We have to see, I know that like Captain Pike, as they've depicted him is a real nice guy, but we got to see him getting some bare knuckle brawling.
And we know that Pike loves to ride a horse.
And he does love horses. That's right. Yeah, he grew up in the Mojave. So, well, at the end of the show here, let's talk My Space Dad Can Beat Up Your Space Dad. The last time you were on the show, actually way back when you were on the show to talk about Justice, you said that Janeway was your favorite captain because of her command presence and that her duty was to the crew. How do you think that she would have conducted the mission in the Expanse?
I think Janeway would have acted a lot like Archer, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I think there's definitely episodes where she does a lot of the same sort of things. Because she and Archer had a pretty similar situation in a lot of ways because they were cut off and separated from any sort of support.
Yeah, she has this dogged goal that she has to accomplish.
Yeah. So I think Janeway would have done a lot of the same things that Archer did. I think Janeway probably also would have done some of the not so good things that Archer did in season 3.
Janeway would have had the benefit of not only her science experience, but, the advanced sensors of the Voyager. So maybe they would have been able to solve the mystery of the spheres a little earlier.
Oh, that's true. She has the science background too.
Yeah.
There is that.
And not had to like threaten to space people and try to get the information. And
steal someone's engine. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking the other day, I had totally forgotten about that episode where they Mission Impossible a guy.
Oh, yeah. I love that episode.
Yeah, that's a great episode. That's another one that would fit into this sort of cop show or spy show Trek thing. Yeah, so I think that she would definitely be similar as well. Now that we've reached the end of the show, you'll receive a promotion. And for your former service last year, helping us talk about Star Trek Nemesis, you were promoted to Lieutenant Commander, which means, this is where I take out a little box, slide it across the table. There's a single solid pip inside. You've been granted the rank of Captain.
Oh, fancy.
Why is it when people get promoted on Star Trek, it's always like they're being proposed to? Like their superior officer, their boss should get down on one knee, and give them the little pip. Well, congratulations on your promotion. Way back in season 4, when we were talking about Justice, you said that you'd be working in the engineering department as a gopher. Now, we don't often see engineering officers promoted all the way to captain. How do you think that coming...
We do have one.
Oh, we've got Geordi LaForge.
Geordi was never... Well, Geordi was a captain, but he was a commanding captain. I was thinking Scotty, who was a captain, rank of captain, but was still an engineer.
That's true. He was. Yeah, that's right. Well, how do you think that coming up as an engineer would affect an officer's command style?
I think they would be more I think they would be very good at managing people to do things, because I think a chief engineer has to do that sort of thing. So I think they would be very good at that. I think they would also have a better idea of what the ship can do and what they can make a ship do. But I think it definitely, if you look at Geordi, he has to manage, an entire engineering department, has to tell these people, you got to work on this, you got to do that. I think that would also work. Those would be skills that would work well for a captain or someone in a command role as well.
Yeah, that delegation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think that maybe in a rush, they would let's just go warp 9, not 9.5, because I know these engines. We don't want to push them too hard.
Yeah.
Well, Captain Hait, thanks for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can at EISDpod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
Best place to find me is on Twitter. I'm at Tyrannicus. That's Tyranicus.
And you're up to a significant number of followers now.
Yeah, 5,000 people care about what I say for some reason, and I have no idea why.
That's great. And where can people find a license to, Kvetch? Spiel?
License to Spiel, because it's a play on License to Kill.
Sure.
You can find License to Spiel, and it's spelled with the British way of license, Licence. You can find us on Twitter at, I think it's Podspiel.
Podspiel.
That's Podspiel. Or just search for License to Spiel in all the normal places you would find a podcast.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining me. We're signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed. Backtracking is back for an all-new season. Hi, I'm Caliban.
And I'm Gooey Fame.
And we'd like to introduce you to Backtracking, the podcast that explores the real-world inspirations behind your favorite episodes of Star Trek.
From historical events to classical literature to blockbuster films, we go where no pod has gone before to seek out the origins of classic Trek tales.
Did you know, Gooey, that the TNG episode Too Short a Season was an allegory for the Iran-Contra affair?
Yeah, only sweatier. Did you know that the Enterprise episode Regeneration was an homage to the John Carpenter film The Thing?
Archer and T'Pol freezing to death over a bottle of whiskey would have been a controversial ending.
As a dog lover, Archer would not like The Thing, I'm guessing.
Oh my god, movie night is canceled. Join us every other Thursday for a journey back to the beginnings of the Trek universe.
Backtracking is available wherever you get your podcasts.
No, Porthos!